Well, I don't know if they've got any skate rinks in Merriwa or if they ever had one in Ballina, but when I was growing up, there was one nearby in Carringby. It was called Skate Plus. Now, can you imagine me wearing roller skates? I'll give you a clue. It looks something like this. Whoa! But when we went there as kids, it was a place that had music and dancing and lots of crashing and some games as well. And I remember one game in particular. It was called Heads and Tails. It was basically a race, and everyone lined up in the middle, and the DJ who was in charge of everything would call heads for one end and tails for the other, and look something like this. And we'd race towards one end, but the problem was you thought you were about to win, and the DJ would suddenly call out, you're skating towards heads, he'll suddenly call out tails, and you had to turn right around and go back. So you were left with a dilemma. Do I skate towards what he said? Do I stay in the middle? Do I skate the other direction? It was really hard to win that game. Every time he said, change direction, you never knew which way to go. Well, today we're going to spend some time continuing on in the story of Esther. And in chapters 5 to 7, this is a story of great reversal. Great reversal. And rather than have some headings that we go through, I've got 3 questions on the screen. I'd love you to spend time asking these questions as we go through the story. And the 3 questions are this. What reversals take place? How are things turned on their head is the first question. What reversals take place? The second one is, how do we see God's hidden hand at work in this story? How do we see God's hidden hand at work in this story? And the third question I'd love you to be asking as we go through the story is, how does it point to Jesus? How does this story point us forward to Jesus? Well, let's dive in and look at the story so far. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been introduced to Xerxes and his look at me leadership of the Persian Empire. And we saw that this drunk king was showing off. He called on his wife Vashti to come. She refused, and it ended up with the Jew Esther becoming the replacement queen as she won this Night with the King competition. And last week, we saw that the Jews are a hated people. Haman is introduced to us. He has an old hatred, and it is a murderous hatred. Mordecai had angered him, and Haman took that opportunity to try and destroy all of God's people. It was an eve of destruction moment last week, and that eve of destruction moment brought change in Esther. She went from being the classic self-absorbed bimbo to being someone who was brave and willing to even die. If I perish, I perish. And that brings us to chapter 5. That's where we begin this morning. And it's a moment of great tension. If you know the story, perhaps you skip over the tension, but we are left wondering, what will happen to Esther? Will she perish as she approaches the king? Well, very quickly we learn that she doesn't perish. Instead, she pleases Xerxes. He's happy to see her. More than that, he says to her, he's so happy to see her, he says to her, I'll give you anything that you want. Well, not quite. Chapter 5, verse 3, have a look with me. The king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you. Now, when the king of Persia says that, he doesn't really mean he's going to give half his kingdom. You'd be a very foolish person to ask for that. But what he is saying is, I'm in a good mood. Try your luck and see what I will give you. And Esther, we think, well, this is your moment, Esther. Ask for your people to be saved. But that's not what she asks for. It's a surprising request. She asks for dinner with the king and with Haman, the one she knows is plotting to kill her people. And verse 5 tells us that the king said, bring Haman at once, so that we may do what Esther had asked. Bring Haman so we can do what Esther asks. And she wants to butter up the king. What better way to do that than through his stomach? That's the way to a man's heart, isn't it? And we see that it works. There's another offer at this first banquet from Xerxes. Ask whatever you want and I will give it, he says to Esther. And again, she requests a second banquet. Let's pause just there for a moment and ask, well, what reversals can we see taking place already? You remember that Esther went from being someone who was merely there for her good looks, her body. And now the king says, go and get Haman so that we can do what Esther's asking. There's a slight power shift. And in fact, from now on, she's referred more often to as Queen Esther. Well, just when things seem to be going well, Mordecai seems to go and ruin it. Verse 9. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, Haman was filled with rage against Mordecai. Things have been going well. Why didn't Mordecai just keep his head down, literally? But no, he gets Haman angry. And even when Haman gets home, he starts boasting to his wife and to his family about his wonderful day and all the things that point to his success. But even as he's boasting, we see he can't get that Jew Mordecai. Can't get him out of his mind. He's so furious. He's so bitter towards him. Yes, the plans for genocide, for wiping out the Jews, are still rolling along nicely, but that's not good enough for Haman. He wants Mordecai dealt with now. And so when his wife and friends make a suggestion to him in verse 14, well, Haman's all too happy to go along with it. Verse 14, they say, have a pole set up reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet, relax and enjoy yourself. Now, did you ever watch the cartoon The Roadrunner when you were growing up? In it, there's this rivalry between the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. And Wile E. Coyote is always setting up traps and schemes and planning to catch the Roadrunner. But the Roadrunner is too clever. Meep, meep. He always gets away. And even as Wile E. Coyote is setting up these elaborate traps, if you've watched the show before, you know how it's going to end. It won't be the Roadrunner that gets caught in those traps. It will be Wile E. Coyote. And that's what's going on as we read this passage. A reversal is coming. Haman is plotting and scheming, but a reversal is coming. And so he sets this deadly trap, but maybe it won't be Mordecai who gets caught when this trap springs closed. Well, the second question, let's pause and ask that. Have you seen God's hidden hand at work yet? Have you noticed it at home? Talk to someone if they're there with you, and have you seen any ways that God is at work in the story so far? Well, if you haven't noticed it yet, have a listen to what happens next. It's in the wee hours of the morning. The first banquet is finished. The second banquet is planned for the next day, and we read in verse 1 of chapter 6 that night the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What a coincidence, isn't it? You couldn't have planned that. Not Mordecai, nor Esther, nor any human plans could have arranged for this. God's fingerprints are all over it. The king can't sleep. He's restless. And so he orders these old chronicles to be read to him about his mighty deeds. And what happens to be read out is the story of Mordecai saving his life. And so as the morning comes, King Xerxes says to his officials, well, what did we do to honor Mordecai? And they answer, well, looking at their books, it seems we didn't do anything. Xerxes knows that isn't right. Such loyalty needs to be rewarded so that others are encouraged to be loyal as well. But he has no idea what to do, how to reward Mordecai. And so he asks, who's here? Which of my officials can help me decide what to do? And it just so happens that Haman has walked in at that moment. He's there. Now we know that he's there to ask King Xerxes to kill Mordecai. But Xerxes doesn't know that. And so he calls for Haman, come here. What should be done for the man that the king delights to honor? Have a look at Haman's ego and his obsession with being honored. He assumes King Xerxes must be talking about himself. Surely, if anyone's going to be honored, it must be me. Who else apart from me could he be talking about, reasons Haman? It's a great comedic moment. We laugh because we know what's going on. And it's not just a comedic moment, it lays a brilliant platform for an almighty slapdown. Haman is going to be slapped down. And so, thinking that the king is going to honor him, he starts laying it on nice and thick. What should be done? Well, verse 8 tells us, Haman says, have them bring a royal robe that the king has worn, and a horse that the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man that the king delights to honor. Are you ready for the big slapdown? Haman wasn't ready at all, and that makes it even funnier. Verse 10, the king commanded Haman, go and get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested. Oh, and by the way, did I forget to tell you who it is that I'm honoring? It's Mordecai, the Jew. Slap! And worse than that, Haman is the one who is forced to go and get the robe, to get the horse, and to parade Mordecai through the city, honoring him in front of everyone. What a slapdown. What a reversal. A brilliant reversal. Well, the trap is closing around Haman. He goes home probably a little bit differently to the day before. He goes home from this morning request depressed. He is in trouble. And even his family know that. Verse 13 tells us that his advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. It's one of those brilliant little bits of insight that these people who aren't God's nation, aren't God's people, and yet they know what's going on here. They know even more than perhaps Mordecai does. And so Haman comes to this second banquet, this second dinner, rather reluctantly. He's hurried along by the king's servants. He's brought there probably filled with fear and dread of what will come next. And in chapter 7, verse 2, at this second banquet that Esther has arranged for, we see that the king is still in a good mood. He again says, Esther, I'm all yours. What do you want from me? Ask, it's yours. This is the moment. This is the moment that this whole story's been leading up to. This is the moment for Esther to act. The iron is hot, and Esther strikes, and oh, how she strikes. First, she asks with brilliant wording that's designed to completely win over the king. She asks that the king save her life and spare her people. If I was only being made a slave, says Esther, well, then I wouldn't have bothered you. But it's worse than that. I've been sold, and my people have been sold for destruction. Well, the king responds the way that you'd expect him to. He's just been told that his favorite woman, this queen, his wife, has been sold to be killed. He responds how you'd expect him to. Verse 5, how dare he? Who is he? Where is he? And Esther does not miss a beat. She pulls out her machine gun. That's what it seems like in her answer. It's a machine gun answer. Dum, 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 dum. Verse 6, a foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman. Boom, boom, boom. The king leaves the room because he is furious. And Haman, he's kind of got nowhere to go. Should I chase after the king who's angry at me? Or should I run away? There's nowhere to run. And he chooses an even sillier option. He stays there alone in the queen's presence. That was never done. And more than that, he falls on the queen and begs for his life. And in another brilliant comedic moment, that too becomes another nail in his coffin. The king walks back in just at the right moment to find Haman throwing himself, leaning over the queen. And the king exclaims, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in my house? Haman's fate is sealed. Do you remember Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner? Well, this is the moment that his trap is about to close on him. And it comes by one of the king's attendants, a eunuch. He speaks up and he helps that trap spring closed. He says, "Your Majesty, I'm not sure if you knew, but Haman has built this giant spike next to his house, and he's done it for Mordecai to be killed upon." You can imagine Haman just thinking, "Did you really have to say that? Couldn't you have kept quiet?" And so the king gives the order. Haman is impaled on the pole that he built for Mordecai to be killed on. Mordecai has been honored, and here he is. He set the trap, but it has snapped closed on his own hand. Now, as this story has progressed, we've asked 3 questions. I hope you've been asking them as you think it through. What reversals take place? How do we see God's hidden hand at work? And this final question, how does it point forward to Jesus? And actually, these are not 3 separate questions. They all work together. These 3 questions are wrapped up in one answer. See, this story is about God's hidden hand at work to bring about a great reversal. There's this beautiful moment where the lowly Jew Mordecai is exalted and lifted up. It's like the DJ saying, "Change direction." And there's this delicious black humor when proud, hate-filled Haman is brought low and is killed, trapped in his own murderous schemes. It's a great reversal. It's like the DJ has called, "Change direction." And none of this was mere drama of the Persian royal court. None of this was just an accident of history. None of this was a meaningless string of coincidences. No, all of this was God's hidden hand at work, powerfully, skillfully working to save his people. He's not mentioned, but his hidden hand was at work. And this was God's plan at work in human history. And this points us forward to some story that is actually the climax of God's hidden hand at work in human history. Jesus. Jesus spoke about and he embodied the greatest of reversals. In the Gospels, we read that Jesus promised, "One day the last shall be first, and the first shall be last." Change direction. Jesus promised that one day the meek will inherit the earth. Change direction. He said that those who are weak, who are powerless, who are downtrodden and forgotten will be remembered, will be lifted up. For God's kingdom is an upside down kingdom. Change direction. And Jesus didn't just speak and teach about this great reversal, he achieved it. Satan must have felt like he was the winner as he watched Jesus being tortured and crucified on that cross. But this was the moment of the great reversal. At Calvary, in the very moment Satan looked like he had won, he was actually defeated forever. Christ had defeated sin and death. He died in our place. He took the punishment we deserve, and he opened up the doors to heaven. Change direction. The great reversal. The Lamb who was slain is now the roaring lion who sits on the throne. And this great reversal that's hinted at in Esther and is fulfilled completely in Jesus, well, it gives us a great hope in the situation we're in right now. Great hope. Now, there's an American pastor, his name's J.D. Greer, and he tells the story of a lumberjack. Now, that's a very American word, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the Australian word or the Irish word is for it, but you know what I mean. A lumberjack. He tells this story about this lumberjack who started chopping down a forest, and he looked up in the tree he was chopping down, and he saw a beautiful bird building its nest. And he didn't want to harm the bird, and so he turned his axe around and he used the flat section of it and he smacked that again and again and again against the tree. Bang, boom, 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 loud noise, not chopping it, but just making a really annoying racket. And the bird got sick of it, annoyed by it, gave up and flew to another tree to build its nest there. And sure enough, the lumberjack followed the bird to that tree. Bang, 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 until the bird moved on again. And he did this a dozen more times until the bird finally got sick of it, cranky, flew away, and built his nest on the nearby cliffs, safe from the lumberjack's axe. The bird was probably thinking, "What the heck, man? Why are you doing this?" But we know the lumberjack was motivated by mercy. We know that the trees were not a safe place to build your nest. They were all going to come down. And so the lumberjack wanted the bird to build its nest in a place that would last. And I can imagine a great reversal moment, a moment where the lumberjack's plans, his motive, were revealed, a moment when the bird, sitting in its new nest, looked down at the forest and saw all these trees being cut down and realized that his life had been saved. Friends, right now, many people are asking, where is God? What is he doing? And perhaps you're asking that question. Perhaps you're a little bit like that bird. You're dismayed. Why is God allowing this upheaval? Why is my world shaking below my feet? Why are all the old certainties I used to rely on suddenly wobbling about and anything but certain? But what if, just like in the lumberjack story, there will be a moment of great reversal, a reveal where you look down and you see what it is that God was actually doing? What if right here, right now in your life, God is at work attacking the foundations of the things you used to rely on, things that were going to fall down anyway? What if right now God is acting in love and he's trying to move us away from relying on things that won't last, from building a house on the sandy land? What if right now he's trying to move us to lasting foundations, that we would rely on things that will never fail? Now, the prophet Isaiah, he puts it far more bluntly than this when he says, at the end of chapter 2 of Isaiah, he says, "Stop trusting in mere men who have but a breath in his nostrils. Of what account is he?" Stop trusting in men. Stop building your house there. Stop relying on that. Stop trusting in men. Well, these chapters of Esther have given us a picture of great reversal, change direction. Now, if you're listening at home and you're not yet a follower of Jesus, then perhaps this morning you have heard Esther's story of reversal, and you've heard the even bigger story of Jesus' reversal, the reversal that he brings. And you've realized that maybe you've been skating in the wrong direction. Maybe you've been putting your trust in the wrong things, in yourself, in your achievements, in this world around you. Is God shaking your old safe places at the moment? Is he tearing down the things that you thought you could lean on? And is he doing that out of love? Perhaps he's calling you to his son, calling on you to turn to Jesus in repentance and put your faith in him for forgiveness and find hope and life and security. And if that's you and you've heard that message today and that you've been convicted by that, can I encourage you, get in touch with the church, get in touch through the website, through Facebook, through the good old-fashioned phone call, get in touch with the leaders. They'd love to talk and pray with you. And if you're already a Christian, perhaps God could be using Esther's story to correct your path as well. Perhaps he's saying to you right now, stop leaning on the wrong things. Stop skating in the wrong direction. Stop chasing after the same things this world chases after. Stop trusting in the same things that they trust in. God brings a great reversal. Only Jesus offers security. Only Jesus offers us a sure hope. Only Jesus offers us a glorious future. The Lamb who was slain is now sitting on the throne as the roaring Lion of Judah. So skate to him. Trust in him. Cling to him.